Giving all glory and honor and praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Yokakadash. Double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom and salutations to the hopeful elect, beginning with the 144,000 and the rest of the men, women, and children of the hopeful elect. I'm your brother Magan Shalamar. Title of this video is The Destructive Hidden Hand of Amalek, so-called small hat, so-called white man, but they're known as the Edomites. Amalek is the chief tribe of the Edomites. This video goes into the hidden elite. The elite are the small hats that control the central banking, that's actually the running this kingdom of Esau on this world of wicked. And this video goes into history, showing you how they start wars and how they're behind the wickedness they are doing on this earth. And that's also showing you how the World War III is going to take place and who's behind it, because they want to push their agenda, which is the New World Order, which is to bring down the dollar and to bring in issuing the micro chip, RFID chip. So without further ado, this is a sort of long video. I'm gonna let it play though, because it's very informational, informative. Fair use, not for monetary gain, but for educational purpose only. Fair use.
We're told that war is the ultimate clash of civilizations, a struggle between nations, ideologies, armies, and flags. We see grainy black and white photos of soldiers in trenches. We hear stories of sacrifice and heroism, and we learn the names of the generals and the battles they won or lost. But what if that's just the surface story, the one told in textbooks? What if I told you that beneath that story there's another one? A story not about nations, but about numbers on a ledger. A story where the deadliest conflicts in modern history weren't just tragedies, but were structured in part like giant business transactions. And what if the goal of these transactions wasn't for one side to win, but for a very small group of people to profit, no matter who lost? Imagine you own two competing sports teams. You finance both of them. You pay for their stadiums, their uniforms, and their players. On the day of the championship game, you don't wear either team's colors. You don't cheer for a winner. Because you know no matter which team hoists the trophy, the real winner is you. You own it all. Now replace those sports teams with the most powerful armies of the 20th century. Replace the championship game with World War I and World War II, and replace the trophy with the wealth of entire nations. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but it's the story of a very real and very simple private banking strategy. A strategy that was perfected over 100 years ago, and which views war not as a human catastrophe, but as the single greatest generator of debt in the world.
Whether you have money or not, I recommend you buy this.
To the person who issues the debt, it doesn't matter who fires the bullets, as long as both sides have to borrow money to buy them. Our story begins not in a trench, but in the chaos of the London Stock Exchange on a cloudy morning in June of 1815. The fate of Europe was being decided on a battlefield in Belgium. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, was facing the British army, led by the Duke of Wellington in a small town called Waterloo. Every merchant, banker, and politician in London was desperate for news. If Napoleon won, the British economy would collapse. If Wellington won, England would rule the world. The value of everything, especially government bonds, the certificates of debt the British government sold to pay for its army, hung in the balance. Standing in the middle of this panic was a man named Nathan Rothschild. His family was different from the old money aristocrats of Europe. They weren't lords or dukes, they were bankers. But they had built something far more powerful than any single kingdom, a private, continent-wide intelligence network. The Rothschild family had five brothers, strategically placed in the five most important financial centers of Europe: Frankfurt, Vienna, Paris, Naples, and London. They communicated using a network of secret couriers, carrier pigeons, and coded messages. Their private network was so good, it was consistently faster than the official messengers of kings and governments. Information was their real currency. And on that day in 1815, Nathan Rothschild, the head of the London branch, knew something nobody else in England knew. He had just received a secret message from his agent on the Belgian border. Wellington had won, Napoleon had been defeated, Britain was safe, its government bonds were about to skyrocket in value. He could have gone straight to the market and bought every bond he could find, making a massive fortune. But Nathan did the opposite. He walked into the stock exchange, stood in his usual spot, and with a grim look on his face, he began to sell his British government bonds. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Nathan Rothschild was the most influential financier in London. If he was selling, it could only mean one thing. He must have heard from his network that Wellington had lost. The panic was instantaneous. A tidal wave of fear swept the trading floor. Everyone started selling. Rothschild knows, the whispers went. Sell everything. The price of British bonds crashed, then it crashed again. The market went into a full-blown meltdown with people dumping their life savings, selling the debt of their own country for pennies, because they thought it was about to become worthless. But while everyone was frantically selling in the open, a handful of Rothschild's agents were quietly, secretly buying. They bought everything they could get their hands on, scooping up the entire market for a tiny fraction of its real value. A few hours later, the official government messenger finally arrived in London confirming the news. Wellington was victorious. The market exploded. The price of British bonds didn't just recover, it shot to historic highs. The men who had sold in a panic just hours before were ruined. And Nathan Rothschild? He hadn't just made a fortune. He had, in one single morning, multiplied his family's wealth by a factor of 20. Some historians say that after this move, the Rothschild family owned a controlling stake in the entire British economy. This move at Waterloo wasn't just a clever trade, it was the birth of a blueprint. It revealed a profound truth about the relationship between war, debt, and power. The lesson was simple. The real lasting profit in war is not in winning it. It's in financing it. When nations go to war, they need money, and they need it fast. They borrow staggering amounts by selling those government bonds. They are essentially mortgaging their country's future. And a private banker is more than happy to give them the loan. Because that debt is real, no matter who wins the war. It has to be paid back with interest by the taxes of the citizens for generations to come. The ultimate victor of a war is not the nation with the last soldier standing, but the creditor who financed the fight. This blueprint, this strategy of using conflict to generate massive, risk-free, government-backed debt was so powerful, so brutally effective, that it would not be forgotten. It would become the foundation of a dynastic business model, a model that, 100 years later, would be scaled up to turn the First and Second World Wars into the most profitable events in human history. But by then, it wouldn't just be the Rothschilds. Other families, watching from a new financial empire across the ocean in America, had taken notice. And they were about to apply that same blueprint to a global conflict, funding both sides of the trenches, generating a bill that would ultimately cost the world over $4 trillion. By the dawn of the 20th century, the center of the financial world was starting to shift from London to New York. In America, a new kind of industrial royalty was emerging. Families with names like Rockefeller, who controlled the oil that powered the world, and Morgan, who controlled the steel and the railroads that built the modern economy. J.P. Morgan wasn't just an American banker. His father had started as a partner in a London-based firm. And the House of Morgan was, for all intents and purposes, the American representative of British and European financial power, deeply intertwined with the Rothschild network. They were the bridge through which European capital flowed into the booming American industrial machine. On the other side of this new American landscape were the Rockefellers. John D. Rockefeller had built an empire, Standard Oil, that was so powerful it was a global monopoly. But his real ambition wasn't just to sell oil, it was to control the banking system that financed the industries that used the oil. The Rockefellers, through their control of National City Bank, began to build a financial empire to rival Morgan's. These families were competitors, but they understood the same fundamental blueprint. They knew that real power wasn't just in making things, it was in controlling the credit that allowed things to be made. And they saw what was coming. In 1914, the powder keg of Europe finally exploded. World War I began. America, under President Woodrow Wilson, declared itself neutral. Wilson famously said America must be impartial in thought as well as in action. Most Americans wanted nothing to do with Europe's ancient quarrels. They saw the Atlantic Ocean as a great wall protecting them from the madness. But for the bankers on Wall Street, neutrality wasn't a principle. It was a business opportunity. War, then as now, is unimaginably expensive. Britain and France, the Allied powers, needed everything. They needed rifles, bullets, cannons, steel, copper, chemicals, and oil. And America was the only country with industrial power to supply it all. At first, the Allies paid for these supplies the old-fashioned way, with gold. They shipped chests of solid gold bullion across the Atlantic to New York. But the war was burning through money and materials at a rate the world had never seen. Within a year, the Allies' gold reserves were running dangerously low. They were on the verge of going broke. They couldn't afford to buy the materials they needed to keep fighting. This was a moment of crisis for the Allies, but it was a moment of opportunity for the House of Morgan. J.P. Jack.
Switch to TurboTax.
who had taken over from his famous father, stepped in and made the British government an offer. He would become their sole purchasing agent in the United States. Any bullet, any barrel of oil, any bale of cotton the Allies needed to buy in America, they had to buy through him. He also organized a syndicate of over 2,000 American banks and arranged a massive loan to the Allies for $500 million, an almost unbelievable amount of money at the time. It was the largest single loan in financial history, and it was just the beginning. Suddenly, American neutrality was a fantasy. The country wasn't officially at war, but its entire industrial and financial system was now mobilized to support one side of the conflict. The profits were enormous. J.P. Morgan & Co. was collected a commission on every single dollar the Allies spent in America. The industries controlled by the Morgans and Rockefellers, from steel to oil, were running 24 hours a day, fulfilling war contracts. The American economy was booming, all fueled by the war in Europe. But here's where the blueprint gets interesting. What about the other side? Germany. While J.P. Morgan was busy turning America into a bank and arsenal for the Allies, a different set of financiers was managing the German war effort. One of the most prominent was Max Warburg of the Warburg banking family. His brother, Paul Warburg, was an immigrant to the United States. He had been a key architect of the new American Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, and was now one of its first governors. So you had one brother, Max, who was the head of the German Secret Service and a top financier for the German war machine. And you had another brother, Paul, sitting at the very top of the American financial system that was arranging the loans to fight that same German machine. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the nature of international banking. These families were American, or British, or German. Their allegiance wasn't to a flag, it was to the family business. And their business was finance. Through institutions like the Rockefeller-controlled National City Bank, loans were being quietly arranged not just for the Allies, but for interests that were beneficial to the German side as well. Money has no passport. By 1917, J.P. Morgan and his banking syndicate had loaned over $2 billion to the Allies. They had placed a massive bet. And they were beginning to get nervous, because it looked like their bet might be going bad. The war was not going well for the Allies. Germany's submarine warfare was choking off supplies in the Atlantic. Russia was collapsing into revolution on the Eastern Front, which would free up millions of German soldiers to fight in the West. The French army was on the verge of mutiny. Britain was nearly bankrupt. For the Morgan and Rockefeller syndicate, this was a terrifying prospect. If the Allies lost the war, they would likely default. Their $2 billion in loans made with the money of American investors and depositors, would become worthless. The entire American banking system, which was now inextricably tied to the Allied cause, could collapse. President Wilson's neutrality was no longer a good business strategy. It was a threat. The bankers didn't just need the Allies to survive, they needed them to win. And there was only one way to guarantee that outcome. America had to enter the war. There's a myth we learn in school about why America entered World War I. We're told it was about the sinking of the Lusitania, a passenger ship torpedoed by a German U-boat. We're told it was a moral crusade to make the world safe for democracy. But the timeline tells a different story. The Lusitania was sunk in 1915. America didn't declare war until 2 years later in 1917. For those 2 years, President Wilson ran and won re-election on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." He knew the American people did not want to send their sons to die in Europe. So what changed? The money, the loans to the Allies were coming due. The risk of default was growing every day. The same newspapers and magazines that had been praising Wilson's neutrality were suddenly filled with stories of German atrocities. A massive propaganda campaign began, funded by the very same banking and industrial interests that stood to lose everything the Allies lost. J.P. Morgan himself spent millions financing a pro-war lobbying effort. They painted the Germans as inhuman monsters, and the war as a glorious battle for civilization itself. The pressure on President Wilson became immense. In April 1917, he went before Congress and asked for a declaration of war. The investment had to be protected. American soldiers were drafted, trained, and shipped across the Atlantic. It tipped the balance of power. Just over a year later, Germany surrendered. The bankers' bet had paid off. Their loans were safe. But the story doesn't end there. Winning the war wasn't the final step of the blueprint. The most profitable part was yet to come, financing the peace. In 1919, the victorious leaders met at the Palace of Versailles in France to write the peace treaty. The public believed this was about creating a lasting peace, but behind the scenes, it was about settling the debts. The Allied nations, particularly Britain and France, owed billions of dollars to the American bankers. They had no way to pay it back. So they came up with a plan. They would force Germany to pay for everything. Not just the money they owed America, but the entire cost of the war for everyone. The Treaty of Versailles imposed a crippling debt on Germany, a sum so vast and astronomical that it was impossible for the country to ever repay it. John Maynard Keynes, a British economist at the conference, called it the Carthaginian peace, designed not just to punish Germany, but to destroy its economy for generations. He warned that it would lead to nothing but bitterness, resentment, and eventually another war. He was right. But for the international bankers, it was a masterpiece. They had created a perfect circle of debt. Germany now owed an impossible amount of money to Britain and France. And Britain and France owed their war debts to the banks in New York. The money would simply flow from the German taxpayers through London and Paris and into the vaults of J.P. Morgan and National City Bank with interest. It was a global collection agency enforced by treaty. But there was a problem. Germany was broke. The war had ruined its industry. Its people were starving. How could a bankrupt nation pay these massive reparations? This is where the blueprint enters its most cynical and brilliant phase. The bankers came up with a solution. They would loan Germany the money to pay them back. Starting in the 1920s, Wall Street, led by J.P. Morgan, orchestrated a series of massive loans to Germany. The most famous was called the Dawes Plan. American investors were encouraged to buy German bonds, which paid a very high interest rate. That money flowed into the German economy, which allowed Germany to rebuild its industries and start making its reparation payments to France and Britain.
This is the most anticipated.
Then used that same money to pay back their war loans to J.P. Morgan. It was a perpetual motion machine of money, greased by debt. American investors would lend money to Germany. Germany would pay that money to the Allies. The Allies would pay that money back to the American banks. And the banks, of course, took a fee at every single step of the transaction. It was an incredible racket, but it had another even more significant effect. The flood of American capital didn't just rebuild Germany's economy. It built a new, modern, highly efficient industrial machine. Companies like I.G. Farben, the German chemical giant, and Vereinigte Stahlwerke, the German steel trust, were recapitalized and reorganized with American money using American technology and management techniques. The Rockefeller family's Standard Oil entered into a deep partnership with I.G. Farben, sharing patents and technology. American carmaker Henry Ford built a massive new factory in Germany. The Union Banking Corporation in New York, directed by a man named Prescott Bush, the father and grandfather of two future American presidents, was financing the very German industrialists who were now secretly rearming the country. Wall Street wasn't just rebuilding Germany, they were building the economic and industrial engine that would soon be taken over by the Nazi Party. They were financing their own future enemy. Why? Because the blueprint is not about ideology. It's not about right versus wrong, or democracy versus fascism. It's about profit. A stable, peaceful, and debt-free Germany was not a good business proposition. A Germany that was trapped in a cycle of debt, dependent on foreign loans, and powerful enough to be a threat. That was a business that could be milked for decades. By the late 1920s, the whole fragile system was beginning to crack. It was all built on the illusion of the Roaring '20s, a bubble fueled by the easy credit of the new Federal Reserve. In 1929, the bubble popped. The stock market crashed. The American loans to Germany dried up overnight, and the German economy, which had become completely dependent on those loans, was plunged into chaos. Unemployment skyrocketed. The people became desperate, and in that desperation, they turned to a radical new leader who promised to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, restore German pride, and find someone to blame for all their problems. His name was Adolf Hitler. The bankers' Carthaginian peace had worked exactly as Keynes predicted. It had not created peace. It had created the perfect conditions for the next, even more destructive war. The rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party in Germany wasn't a historical accident. It was the direct result of the economic desperation created by the Treaty of Versailles and the subsequent collapse of the American credit bubble. The German people didn't vote for a monster. They voted for someone who promised them work, food, and a way out of the crushing debt that had humiliated their nation. And once again, the international bankers saw a business opportunity. As Hitler began his massive rearmament program in the 1930s, a question has always lingered. Where did the money come from? Germany was still technically bankrupt. The answer is that capital continued to flow quietly from both London and New York. The Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, located in Switzerland, played a crucial role. This was supposed to be a neutral institution, set up to handle German reparation payments, but its board included bankers who were financing both sides, like the head of the Nazi Reichsbank, Hjalmar Schacht, alongside directors from J.P. Morgan and the Bank of England. Throughout the war, the BIS would continue to do business with the Nazis, even accepting looted Nazi gold taken from the central banks of conquered nations like Austria and Czechoslovakia. The Rockefeller and Morgan-controlled oil companies continued to supply the raw materials that fueled the German war machine. Standard Oil, through its partnerships with IG Farben, provided critical patents for synthetic rubber and fuel, without which Hitler's blitzkrieg would have been impossible. The lines of international finance and industry once again blurred, transcending national allegiances. Money and profit were the only true loyalties. When war finally broke out in 1939, the blueprint was simply run again, but on an even grander scale. America once again declared itself neutral while President Franklin D. Roosevelt began preparing the country to become the arsenal of democracy. The same banks that had financed the rise of German industry were now financing the Allied effort to destroy it. The debt generated by World War II dwarfs anything the world had ever seen. The United States government borrowed hundreds of billions of dollars to finance the war, selling war bonds to its own citizens, and taking on massive loans from the very banking system that it created. The national debt skyrocketed by over 400%. It was the single largest creation of government debt in human history. And who collected the interest on that debt? The private banks that made up the Federal Reserve System. They had turned the patriotism of the American people into a stream of guaranteed, risk-free profit that would flow for generations. The war destroyed Europe and Japan, leaving millions dead and entire cities in rubble. But for the architects of the financial blueprint, it was the ultimate success. It established a new world order, one where America was the undisputed military and economic superpower. And the U.S. dollar, controlled by its central bank, was the world's reserve currency. The cycle is now complete. A war financed by private banks creates a crisis. That crisis is used to impose a punitive peace treaty that creates more debt and desperation. That desperation leads to another, even bigger war. That second war generates an astronomical amount of new debt, which concentrates unimaginable wealth and power in the hands of the creditors who funded the whole destructive cycle from the beginning. It's a strategy as simple as it is ruthless. You finance both sides of a conflict. You profit from the build-up, you profit from the destruction, you profit from the rebuilding. You use war to generate government debt, and you use that debt to control governments. The human cost, the lives lost, the cities burned, the generations scarred, is never entered on the balance sheet. So let's go back to our story of the two sports teams. It's not just that you own both teams. You also own the company that sells the tickets. You own the television network that broadcasts the game. You own the hot dog stands and the parking lots. And you're the one who loans both teams the money to pay their players, taking a cut every step of the way. When the game is over, the field is a mess, the players are exhausted and broken, but you are richer and more powerful than ever before. You didn't care who won. You just needed the game to be played. This isn't ancient history. The blueprint is still running. Think about the endless conflicts of the last 70 years. The Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, the war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. Each conflict, regardless of its stated political goal, has one guaranteed outcome: massive government, borrowing and spending. Trillions of dollars created out of thin air by central banks and loaned to governments. Trillions of dollars of profits for the military-industrial complex and the financial institutions that are inextricably linked to it. The names of the families may change, and the banks may merge and rebrand, but the underlying strategy remains the same. It is a system designed to privatize the profits of war and socialize the costs onto the public through debt and inflation. We, the taxpayers, pay for the bombs, and we then pay the interest on the money that was borrowed to buy the bombs. We are told that these wars are fought for freedom, for democracy, for national security. But if you follow the money, you find a much simpler, darker motive. You find a business model that thrives on conflict, instability, and destruction. It is the $4 trillion strategy that funded the bloodiest century in history, and its operating system is still humming away right now, quietly in the background of our modern world.
So you see the small hats, the central bank top leaders of these banking families, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the Morgans. You can go on DuPont's, the Bush, the Bush family played a part of that, funding Germany. So they all making money. They the top banking family, and they make the rules in this world. And their rules this time is going to be different because they're not trying to get rich. In the history past, they was trying to get more. They were trying to get rich and get money. They got all the money now. Now they want to issue in that new world order when the system crashed. And as we know it, America is crumbling at the foundations every day. This is Isaiah chapter 14, verse 6. It says, "He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, He that ruled the nation in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. Right, and that's the small hats, so-called white man. Top banking family. They're the ones who behind the machine of war. These are the people who is issuing out the New World Order, which to crash this dollar, American dollar, in order to bring in, issuing the mark of the beast. We know that to be the micro C here, the RFID chip. This is verse 12. It says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nation?" And you see that Esau is fallen. His kingdom on this earth is fallen. And how art thou cut down from the ground? Because they so powerful. Their regime, their rulership was so powerful on this earth, but Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai is bringing this Esau kingdom down. They've fallen out of their heaven and they coming down on earth, meaning that they've fallen from their luxury that they possess on this earth, and they're falling out of rulership. And they did us weaken the nations, as you can see through the wars, through their legislation, through their religion. They weakened the nations of all these nations, all the heathen nations. And who got it the worst was the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American Indians, the true Israelites. But Amalek is going to have to pay for that. The Edomites are going to pay for that. All the nations are going to pay, but Esau, Edom, has done it the worst, being the wicked on this earth. This is Numbers chapter 24, verse 20. It says, "And when he looked on Amalek, he took up this parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever." Right, because the elite, the light bearer, they're the ones that's behind this wickedness. They're the one who funds the wars. They're the ones who pushes their legislation by controlling the politicians, the governments of federal and local of this whole entire world. And through that powerful rulership they have, they're going to have the whole world come under the RFID chip that all going to have to take, small and great, rich or poor. You're going to have to take, free and bond. Only the elected's not going to take that RFID chip, because once they take that, you can become a slave for Esau, Edom. That's what they want. They want this whole world to be slaves. That's the outcome that they're looking for. But you see what Yahweh said, their latter end shall be they're going to perish forever. Esau is going to perish, So with that, I hope pray you was edified, call halal, Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shah, Ba'Shem, Makah HaKadosh. Double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom.